What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today is Best Served Podcast 217, and we are talking challenging the status quo with Micah Melton of the Alinea Group. Micah, thanks for being on.
Yeah, man, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Best Served Chilled channel. Everyone knows I'm fired up about always talking about beverage producers and professionals. And so Micah definitely is one of those out there in Chicago that is really at the forefront of what's happening in the beverage and specifically cocktail scene. And so you're the beverage director at the Alinea Group. The Alinea Group, obviously, the Alinea restaurant, everyone knows. The Aviary, anybody who knows Chicago and or knows cocktails knows the Aviary and kind of what's happened there. So for anybody who does not know, tell people kind of what is it that they can expect from the Alinea Group and then specifically from the Aviary.
Right. So I guess the Alinea Group was founded at Alinea. So the first restaurant was Alinea. Very progressive, kind of modern thinking. I guess the biggest way I describe our restaurant group to people is that it's a restaurant group that never does anything just because that's how it's been done in the past. So we kind of constantly are asking questions. You know, we try to at least ask the question if that's the best way to do something, and then always are thinking about it and come up with different ways to do it. It might not be the best way. It might not work for all restaurant groups, but I think we stumble on a lot of cool, interesting ways to do things and just kind of do things a little differently than everybody else, which is fun.
Let's a lot differently, Micah. A lot differently than most restaurants for sure. And just to, you know, you're very humble about it. So I appreciate that. I'm going to give daps for sure. So, you know, 3 Michelin stars, number 1, 2, or 3 restaurant in the country rated every single year, you know, a top 50 restaurant every single year, and just really at the forefront. And, you know, having interacted with Grant and your team a few different times, you know, I mean, eating floating sour green apple taffy balloons, like literally floating food, or, you know, thinking about the terroir. I remember talking to Grant when we were doing demos at the International Chef Congress, and they're like, we just got back from doing stuff in Spain, and you guys are doing dinners and stuff out there, and we're struck by terroir. And he's like, so we came back to Chicago, and we're like, what's the terroir of Chicago? And they're like, they're concrete and graffiti. And so you guys were making faux concrete and graffiti, and you guys, you know, paint the tables and like plate on the tables. It's really a completely different level of experience. So I want to set the tone for that, because I think people need to understand that. Now I want to take that ethos, that thinking, that approach, that mentality that you all have at Alinea, and then the Aviary. Then tell people specifically the Aviary, kind of what's happening there, because now you're taking that approach, making it slightly more approachable, I'd say, at least from a price point standpoint, and then applying that really to kind of the cocktail scene and pushing yourselves to the forefront of that. So the Aviary, what's happening there?
Right. So I guess the Aviary is kind of our take on, you know, if you applied the culture, the mentality of a kitchen, but to a cocktail bar.
Right.
So a lot of cocktail bars are amazing, but the experience is such that, you know, you sit down at the bar and you're kind of in the bartender's way for the most part. You know, like you are, you know, you're a bunch of steps in a process that you know, bartenders don't get into bartending to ring in tickets and run your check, and you know what I mean. So there's like, we tried to pull a lot of the distraction, I guess, out of making drinks. And that is basically just kind of to let us hone in and try to add a couple more dimensions to the cocktails. So that's kind of the main purpose. You know, we redid a lot of things with the same kind of brigade mentality, where you know, there's not a traditional bar, so you don't walk up to a bar and order a drink. So the bartenders only have to have the mise en place for the drinks that are on the menu at any given time. So it turns more into working a station in a kitchen. And in that same way, we have people that are on, you know, what would be considered like the saucier, or, you know, the person that's cooking fish or meat or garde manger, but in the bar. So each person has a specific set of drinks. They only make those drinks for that night, and it's only that person that makes a drink. So if you order it multiple times. You get the same person the whole night that makes the drink. And then just because of that, the drinks are a little more consistent, a little faster. And that's all just kind of kitchen mentality, I guess.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense to me. All right, I want to get into that a little bit more. I want to take people back. I always am fascinated why we get into the industry, why we do what we do. So all the way back quickly for us is, when did you first catch the hospitality bug? When did you get into this industry?
Yeah, I guess so. My family is very food focused. So I think, it's kind of, it's my family's fault for the most part because, every gathering was kind of based around the kitchen and we'd have big meals and, we had these ritual kind of cuisines that we would have at, every gathering. And so it kind of was this big thing where, and I would always try to help when I was a kid. And, my ancestors owned restaurants and things like that. So it was kind of always in my blood, I think. So that was the big one, I think. I considered going to culinary school when I was graduating from high school. Mm-hmm. I think I was a bit scared because in my brain, it kind of equated culinary school with large city, and I wasn't really ready to move to, New York or Chicago or anything like that. And so I kind of put it off and followed the footsteps of where my family had gone. So I went to the University of Iowa for a couple of years, and I went for computer science. Video games, I think, are a big part of my life too.
Sure.
And I've always, growing up in the generation I did, it was kind of, another thing that was ingrained in your blood as a kid. So I thought I wanted to make video games. And I think, after a couple of years of school for that, I just realized that I don't really want to sit in front of a computer for 40, 50 hours a week. In the sense of not playing the video game, actually working. And, when I thought about it, it really seemed that fun. So I ended up, after a couple of years of that, I switched to culinary school and kind of did some better research and was a little more grown up and ended up finding Kirkwood's community college culinary school. And at the time they were building a hotel and it was very well regarded and it was not in Chicago. And so I kind of decided to do that and ended up going to culinary school in Kirkwood. And that's kind of where I really took the step to make it a career.
And what took you to Chicago then?
So I lived in Chicago. I lived outside of Chicago for a year and a half. For one of the schools I attended was DeVry, which is a technical school. So I kind of fell in love a little bit with the city then. And then after I went back to Kirkwood, I actually went with a bunch of exchange students. And they were kind of they were only here for a short amount of time. So they wanted to travel to Chicago and check out a bunch of the restaurants. So I went there as an 8 top or something to Charlie Trotter's. And that was kind of my big first Chicago experience, culinary. And I was 19, I think, at the time. And so we set up a bunch more stuff. And because of that, I kind of researched a little bit more on the Chicago scene and discovered Alinea and actually ate at Alinea on my 21st birthday. So, and there I was just blown away.
Wow.
I ate at Alinea, Blackbird, Moto, a bunch of restaurants for my 21st birthday, and it was just a crazy weekend. And so yeah, I just really fell in love with Chicago then. So
I mean, at a high level, you hit some of the very best restaurants in Chicago, in the country, for sure. I think Blackbird is one of those places, and Spiaggia, where anybody would be going to Chicago. This is a little bit before every menu was online. I'd be get me a menu, because I wanted to always check in on what Paul was doing at Blackbird, what Tony was doing at Spiaggia. It very much was a couple of those places. So for any of us food geeks and chefs that are, getting to our 40s, that's where we really were thinking about the industry. That's where the moving and shaking was happening. So, and at 21, that's wow. Charlie Trotter, Alinea, Amaro Cantu, the late great Amaro Cantu, and the late great Charlie Trotter as well at Motoso. So you were in it at a young age. I really appreciate that. So then you kind of get on that path, that chef-driven path. You're focused on that. Were you back of house then when you got into kind of the job side, the career side, or did you directly go into the front of house?
Yeah, so when I was in culinary school, I actually took a job at a bar to kind of pay my bills. So that's when I found the beverage side of the industry. So
Yep.
and it was a college bar. It was nothing fancy. No, not really cocktails. It was, highballs and beers and stuff like that. But the instant gratification, I guess, of making drinks, I think was something that I found there that it was really hard to get away from. So even when I went and took jobs in kitchens and stuff like that, it was just something that I could never really scratch that itch, if you will. So
Yep.
I stayed in both sides. I was, when I ended up moving to Chicago, I was a general manager of two different bars. They were owned by the same owner. And I was executive chef at a restaurant in Iowa City. And I also worked at the culinary school that I went to on the hotel line for a couple of their services.
All
So
right.
it was kind of crazy what I was doing, but it was just
Yeah.
because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, really.
That's pretty normal in this industry. This is why I
Yeah.
asked this. It makes a lot of sense to me. So now I really understand the approach that you're taking was very much at the Aviary, and the Alinea Group is very much the approach you'd already been taking. You kind of were dabbling in both sides. You really appreciate both sides. I'm sure that you found ways to bring the level of thoughtfulness and hospitality to the back house, because we don't always have that. And you were bringing the level of creativity and focus and detail and mise en place. You were bringing that to the front of house. And having done that myself, I know how it made me better on both sides. Always, I was always better in both equations, having the experience in the other. So I love it. I appreciate that. Now let's talk about the way that you're applying that day in and day out. So you mentioned the style that you're doing. I'm not coming up to the bar and ordering a Manhattan. I'm not coming up to the bar and ordering a Call Scotch drink. I'm not coming to the bar at all, potentially. I'm at my seat, but I'm
Right.
engaging in this experience that is very much this culinary experience. It just happens to be in a glass versus a plate or a bowl. So this is something for people to really understand. You're being taken on this journey. Now for you, let's talk about the kind of the style of service beyond that. Am I getting multiple courses of drinks? Am I ordering a drink? Or do I pick a series of drinks? Like, what's the application of the actual process of getting multiple drinks at the Aviary?
Right. So I guess again, we kind of treat it just like a fine dining restaurant. So you sit down and you wouldn't walk into a restaurant with a tasting menu and say, well, I see you have, steak and I see you have potatoes. So can you make me steak frites? Like you don't really necessarily put those things together. So you order off of the menu, and in the Aviary specific, we only offer the things that are on the menu. And like I said, that's just, kind of the system is built so that we have only those items and only those items prepped. And so we don't have a huge back bar that you can kind of run around and make your own drink off of. So you sit down and you pick, usually the menu is somewhere between 19 and 28 cocktails. And then we do offer tasting menus. So we offer 3-course tasting menus, 5-course, and 7-course. And those are, the 5 and 7 are always paired with food, just for the, you're not going to want to drink 5
Alcohol consumption.
Full-size drinks when you get to that.
Yeah.
They're not full-size drinks when you get up to that level of number, but they're paired with food just to kind of, make sure, lighten the load a little bit. But it's kind of backwards of what you would do at a fine dining restaurant in terms of usually you get a glass of wine that's paired to the course, and in this sense we are pairing the food item to the drink that you're going to have. So the menu is more written based on the 5 drinks that we want you to have in a progression, and then we go backwards and add the food pairings to that menu as opposed to the other way around, which is kind of it's not really that weird, but it's just different from what most people are used to.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Let's talk about some of the drinks themselves. I want to paint people a picture of the type of ingredients, the type of techniques that are applied to these drinks so they can really understand how this is. Again, it's just, I don't even know that they're cocktails like what you guys do. I don't know if I even would call them cocktails in the preconceived notion that people have of a cocktail. These, again, are liquefied culinary experiences in glasses. I don't know how to phrase and brand that, but that's what it feels like to me. So why don't we do this? Take us down all the way down a rabbit hole of one single cocktail, every element that goes into it, the thought that went into it, why it is what it is. Like, let's just go down that rabbit hole. What's one drink that really like crystallizes the whole end-to-end process approach of the Aviary?
Right. So I guess there's a few of them, so it's hard to pick one, but
gotta pick one. Who's your favorite kid? Come on.
Right. I think In the Rocks is it's arguably our most iconic presentation, and it's a drink that essentially is, if you look at it, it's an old fashioned that you would get, at most bars. So, but instead of on the rocks, we serve it in the rocks. So we have an ice chef, and so a big part of our program is ice, because water is such a huge part of a cocktail. So shaking or stirring, serving on ice, any of those things, they're adding water, they're adding dilution, which is good because you need water in order to kind of balance the harsh notes of the alcohol.
Yep.
But as cooks, we come from this mentality of like, if you make soup, you're not going to make soup with water. You make soup with chicken stock, right? Or vegetable stock, or, whatever it is. So the more that we can build flavor into our cocktails versus adding water, the more we will. So we want to take, every time, if you shake on ice, if you stir on ice, if you serve on ice, we try to do flavor, or we use that ice as part of the experience. So In the Rocks is not a flavored ice per se. It has been on occasion, but normally it's just a regular ice cube, but it's hollow. So we take like I said, the ice chef has we call it a super chiller. It's essentially an immersion circulator, or a sous vide rig that we use in reverse. So instead of being a constant hot temperature, it's a constant cold temperature.
Right.
So we fill up water balloons, drop water balloons into this bath that's very, very cold. So it's like a freezer, but like a liquid freezer. So it moves the water balloons around. And then after a certain time, you have this shell on the water balloon, on the inside of the water balloon. So you cut away the balloon, and then you can drill in, and the middle is still liquefied because you only have contact from the outside, so it freezes towards the center. So after a certain point, you drill and you can pull all the liquid out, and then you have a hollow piece of ice, right? And so you can look on YouTube, and there's a lot of people that kind of do their interpretation.
I was just gonna say, actually, we got Andrew behind the scenes here, and find one of those YouTube videos because it's really cool. Why are you doing water instead of liquid nitrogen? Another way that you can freeze things into a balloon, which you guys use a lot. I was just interested in that as a technique differentiation.
Right. So the bath is it's half water and half grain alcohol, and that's to get the temperature low enough that it won't freeze when it moves. We have done it before with liquid nitrogen. The problem with liquid nitrogen is it's so cold that it makes the ice very brittle.
Yep.
And so when you end up trying to fill that ice cube back up, there's a lot of like micro cracks and things like that.
Gotcha.
And just the nature of alcohol, when you're putting it inside of a piece of ice, it just wants to melt and get out of the ice.
It makes total sense because your guys is one of your go-tos is the tableside smash of multiple items, and it goes across the table, and it's awesome, dramatic, and I've seen that from you guys too, where there's just a poof of smoke from that beat sphere that's frozen in liquid nitrogen, and the breaking is key to that because it is so brittle. So that makes a ton of sense. All right, so you have this cube, amazing. Thank you for geeking out with us on that. Then kind of how are you going about like filling that? Now what are you thinking about when you're sinking in the rocks?
Right. So that, and the cocktail is fairly straightforward. A lot of times when we've been open, it's been an old fashioned. So we get a barrel of whiskey from Mississippi River Distilling Company, and we make an old fashioned, or we had a Red Hook on our menu, which is like a Manhattan with a little bit of cherry notes.
Yep.
And so a lot of times we just try to simplify and make the perfect form of a classic cocktail, because people still want something that they're familiar with and used to. And at the end of the day, if you can provide that, but also add kind of your own unique touch to it, I think it's cool. So a lot of times it's a very straightforward, we're trying to make the best old fashioned and something that still tastes unique, but tastes like an old fashioned at the end of the day. And so we basically make large batches of that, and we, with a scale, we add basically exactly the amount of water that we want to make it the right dilution, optimal dilution. Mm-hmm. And then that is using a syringe. We shoot it into the hole that we drilled to pull the water out. And we fill the inside back up with, instead of the water that was in there, now it's the cocktail. So now you have an old fashioned inside of that ice cube.
I love it. Challenging the status quo. That's the title of this episode. And that's exactly it. I like it because sometimes we can be so creative that just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And I've even heard Grant talk about that before, that sometimes, it's like we try so many things. The ability to do something just simple, just slightly off center, where it's something people know and something that they don't in the same moment, is a bridge. And I really, really like the thoughtfulness that you're going into that. You also mentioned something, and this is why you and I are talking, is that you're using something like Mississippi River Distilling to have that product in there. And so you're from Iowa. We had Ryan on the show from Mississippi River Distilling, amazing conversation. And he highlights how, you are at the top of the game, yet you're coming back and spending some time with him and his team down there and educating them. So why is it important first for you to find kind of a small batch boutique brand like that? It's, it's not Pappy Van Winkle. It's not, these brands that are iconic. It's somebody small, yet you believe in them. I think that's important. Why is working with somebody like Ryan and Mississippi River important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I just, in general, I think food and beverage is at least finally realizing that, if the impact of your actions are pretty large. So the more you can use stuff that's within, at least a smallish range of where you're at, I think the better, and like, it's not fully possible, like you can't get tequila that's from Iowa or whatever. Right. So sometimes you have to make those calls, but I think in the sense of where there is a product that is close to you that's delicious, I think it's good to use those when you can, especially for us, because it's kind of like the distinguishing thing of the Aviary is it's, especially when you can get single barrel or collaboration, stuff like that. Yeah, those are things that people can't get somewhere else. So right. We always are trying as much as we can to make, even if it's just a glass of whiskey, it's still unique to us because it's our whiskey, or we brewed a beer with a brewery. So we get, our own, a beer that's kind of exclusive to us. And that's, something that you can't walk down the street and pop into any bar and get. So it's just another way to kind of add that uniqueness to the experience.
Stay with that for a minute, because I think that's something that other operations need to be thinking about. Having something that is unique to you is very, very important, because people can buy things that have a price tag at every other location. And then a lot of times they go, which one is the cheapest? And that's a vulnerability of restaurants a lot, right? Is if right. You're only competing on price, you're in trouble a lot of times. And then it's a race to the bottom. Yet if it's a unique experience, if it's the experience itself, it's the product itself, it's the process, it's the people, most importantly, a lot of times it's the people. Why is that something that you guys are clearly investing time and effort into versus just buying it off the shelf? That's easier.
Yeah, I mean, especially in bars, if you look at it, like most bars carry the same products and will give you the same product mixed with the same mixer and the same glass. And it just turns into this thing where, like, unless you're in the right vicinity of where they're at, there's not a whole lot of reason for someone to come and visit you, travel, and kind of spend their time to commute to a place that in reality across the street from where they live could have those same products. So we kind of try to steer away from the mainstream in a way that, like we are clearly in a niche, right? Like this is not a bar that you're going to visit right. once every couple days. You're not going to go there after work every day or whatever it is. So it's not that kind of bar. So we're fine with being a bar that you come to every once in a while. And when you do come there, we want everything to feel, you know, like kind of like a special occasion in a sense. So I think it's great to have neighborhood bars that are, you know, give you something that you want and has this reliability and you know, is something that you're going to go there every single day and get the exact same thing over. But that's not, the Aviary is not like that. So it's, you know, it's just different.
So I want to touch on hospitality as we wrap this up, and then I want to touch on a couple of the people that you mentioned, because it takes a village, it takes a team, and you have a couple of great bar managers that you highlighted, and I want to make sure they get a little airtime. Hospitality, when you get to a certain level, it can get stuffy. It can get uncomfortable sometimes. It's intimidating sometimes. You don't know what to do with your hands when you're a guest. Like, there's just a lot of that. And I know you're very thoughtful about breaking through that a little bit. Talk about hospitality. What's the approach? How do I not feel intimidated when I walk in there, when I don't know what's going on? Everyone looks like there's a bunch of mad scientists working on some stuff. What am I in for? Hospitality. What does that mean to you, to the Aviary, to the Alinea Group?
Right. I guess, you know, for us, it's a huge challenge because the bar is so different from what people expect of bars. So we have a lot to break down right away. A lot of that, like I said, is trying to, in our heads, come up with a list of things that are most people will be ordering. So, you know, your margaritas, your old fashions, things like that are kind of commonplace, so that we can have things that are at least our interpretation or, you know, similar to on the menu. So that's the first thing. People have something that they can kind of grasp onto if they're super uncomfortable. The next thing is like the names on our menu are goofy, funny, punny. You know, it's kind of disarming in a sense, because the first thing that happens when you open that menu is you already are like, you know, it's lightening the mood. And you know, there's a drink on the menu that's called like Jesus can't hit a curveball right now. It's a Serrano drink, so it's like a major league reference or whatever, you know, like. And so there's this whole list of these kind of like off the wall funny names, and it's really just so that you'll have that conversation with your table and then with your server, and then that starts the interactive process. And then we can kind of show you that we are people and not robots. And, you know, at the end of the day, it is hospitality. So we try to make people feel comfortable and relaxed. And then beyond that, a lot of it is just like, you know, telling people how to experience something, because it's not something that you've already done. So it's not like, you know, you're not going to mess it up. We're not going to throw you out or anything. But
you're
just
not,
giving
you're
people,
not the Snoop Dogg Seinfeld, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. And like, again, it takes a team. So you highlighted a couple of your bar managers, just one by one, mention how important it is to have people that can really deliver that level of hospitality and the quality and technique of the product.
Right. So yeah, the two bar managers of the Aviary now are Alexis Tinoco and Jarmel Das. And they are like just amazing, you know, as good as they get.
And start with Alexis. Like, what is Alexis? I want people to know this, and then we'll move to Jamal. I want people to know, if you're in the industry, like, what are you looking for as somebody who's cultivating the best talents, some of the best talent in the industry when it comes to cocktails? What are you looking for? I want people, so much of our audience are industry professionals. I want them to know, like, wow, that very much feels like me. I never realized I could be working at the Aviary. I want them to feel that. So what is that for you, Alexis? What is it that Alexis does so well that is exactly why they are on the team?
Yeah, so she started as basically a food runner, and you know, you could just tell how passionate she was when she started. She just wanted to get her foot in the door, and you could just tell from the beginning that she was there to work, and she was hungry and, you know, ready to kind of do whatever she had to in order to work her way up into the position that she wanted. So that's always a good sign for us. It's not like, experience is great because we want people to have a variance of experience.
Sure.
And like, you know, we were talking about earlier, I think there's little areas of hospitality that kind of give you unique skill sets. So like, high volume bars give you something that a cocktail bar doesn't, and vice versa. Like, so we want people to have a kind of a variance of experience, but we're never going to look at someone's resume and say like, well, you've never worked in a fine dining restaurant, so you can't work here. Because for us, we'd rather teach you how to do something than teach you how to not do something.
Yep.
So like it's almost better for people to have less experience and be teachable and moldable than it is to come in with a whole slew of bad habits or whatever. So I think more for us, it's more about the passion, the drive, and kind of their commitment to hospitality. And Alexis had it from the minute she walked in the door. You could just tell she was oozing drive, and she's never stopped. She's worked there for like 7 years now, and she's just never, every day for her is just like go, 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 go. So
love it. And then Jamal, what is it about them that really like sets apart?
Yeah, so Jarmel, she's kind of more on the high volume side. So she kind of like is a yin and yang for our program, that like when she does anything, when she puts a drink on the menu, like that thing is fine tuned to sell 100 in a night.
Right.
One. And it's crazy just to see, and the more different creative process we have on the team, I think the better the end result is, because everyone kind of is a check and balance on, like mine is more on the presentational side, and Alexis is really good with flavor because she has a lot of, cocktail experience, and Jarmel is really great with like the service side and like, how we're gonna make this drink. And not that that's our only strengths, but like, each of us kind of have our own little hat that we wear, and that allows us to be, as a management team, I think, super well rounded.
Yep.
And yeah, the two of them, I just can't say enough about their attitude when they come in every day. You can't find people like that in the industry. So I'm super lucky to have them both.
It's all about the people at the end of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's going to be about that experience. And I really, really appreciate that. So this is great. I really love getting just the insights into both kind of the technique and the people. And so I appreciate this. This is really, really great. I see why Ryan said, you got to talk to this guy. Like, he was like, whatever you do, make sure you get Micah on the show. So I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for being on.
Of course. Yeah, it's a pleasure. And, anybody that's a friend of Ryan's an instant friend of mine. So it's a good friendship to cross. So
well, I can't wait till the three of us meet up in Chicago and have an Inside the Rocks with a hand-selected barrel of his whiskey. So that sounds like a perfect evening to me. So thank you so much, Micah, for being on the show. You have a great day.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Cheers.
Take care. Cheers.
All right, everybody. That was Micah Melton with the Aviary and the Alinea Group in Chicago. Great episode. Really appreciate, knowing and understanding what's happening at that high level. I think there's a few unique things that set apart the work that they do at the Alinea Group. Yet once again, we see that there's so much more that connects every level of the industry. Once again, it's about finding and cultivating the best people. It is about hospitality. It is about having a message to deliver and finding the vehicle to deliver that, because we are just communicators. We happen to use food and beverage as the medium. That is it for today's show. Thank you all, as always, for tuning in. Cheers.